Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Legal Access. We get together each and every Thursday at this time to give you access to different aspects of the law. Today we're going to be talking about personal injury, kind of a broad topic. That includes if you've been in car accidents, if you've been had a slip and fall accident, maybe you've been hurt on somebody else's property. If you have any questions about any of those topics, make sure and give us a call. We got 30 minutes still on the clock for you to be able to call us. Don't wait till the last minute. The phone number's on your screen, 843-848-8080. Personal injury, that's our topic here today on Legal Access. We're very well equipped to answer any question that you might have. On our panel to answer your questions here today, first from the Maguire Law Firm is Ian Maguire.
Good to see you, Dave.
Also want to welcome in for the very first time Devlin Horton. How you doing today?
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
And also from Maguire Law, we do have Brittney Jones.
Hey, Dave. Happy Thursday.
All right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Happy Thursday, so give us a call and make it even happier for us.
Dave, we're real excited to have Devlin with us. Devlin main office at least, is in Wilmington, North Carolina. We usually don't veer outside of the state of South Carolina, but Devlin's outstanding personal injury attorney, trial attorney. He's with Horton and Mendez. Like I said, in Wilmington, they've got offices in Jacksonville and Apex and Gastonia. So it's great having you here, Devlin. Devlin has, I think, one of the biggest verdicts in the history of North Carolina. Is that right?
That's right, Ian. Thank you so much for having me. Last year we were fortunate enough to get a great verdict for one of our clients, $38.2 million.
And what kind of case was that?
It was a personal injury case that arose at a crosswalk near East Carolina University.
And so it's
awesome.
One of those, I know people don't realize behind the scenes how much work and time goes in behind the scenes. The trial is actually, it's sort of like being I don't know, if you're a professional athlete, it's all the sweat and the work that's done that people don't see that really gets you to where you were, which was an outstanding verdict for a client that was in need of it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It definitely takes a lot of time to get it to that point where you can get in front of a jury and have 12 people, members of the community, pass judgment on past events. And this one took place 3 years before we ever got to get justice for our client.
Yeah, and an outstanding job. We get calls a lot from North Carolina citizens and questioning about their case. And even though the states are contiguous, there are differences in the way cases are tried, and the laws are a little bit different. But generally speaking, when you get to a trial, you're talking to 12 people and trying to get them really to just see the facts of the case and render a verdict, right?
That's right. Yeah, there are differences state to state and county to county. One of the big ones between our two states is North Carolina is a contributory negligence state, where South Carolina is not, and I'm sure you can talk some about that.
Yeah, just briefly, and we talk about the fall type cases where people are injured on premises. In North Carolina, technically, if the plaintiff is found even partially at fault, that can be a complete bar, right, to a recovery.
Even 1% at fault, as unfair as that may be, that can result in somebody not recovering at all, even if somebody else was 99% at fault.
And here in South Carolina, if someone was 10% at fault, there'd be a 10% maybe reduction in their ability to receive a verdict, but they'd still, if they were less than 50% at fault, they'd be able to recover. So there's a number of differences, like I said, that you wouldn't maybe expect since the states are so closely, at least geographically connected. But so other than car wrecks, what other type of cases does your firm handle?
So we, of course, handle car accident, trucking accident, motorcycle accident. We handle the premise liability cases like we were talking about, dog bite incidents, general negligence cases where somebody did something that they shouldn't have that led to somebody getting hurt. And just to touch on something that Ian was speaking on just a few minutes ago, in North Carolina, even cases where somebody might be or think that they're at fault, that doesn't mean that they don't recover. Many times we recover for clients that may think that, oh, there was something I could have done differently, because that's what people do after something happens, is think back through it and think about things that could have been done differently. But that by no means means that they can't recover. And we've had good success at getting that, getting justice for them, even if the circumstances weren't perfect.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Brittney, you always say when if you have a question, call an attorney.
Yeah.
It's not going to cost you anything generally to get information, and sometimes you might not think you have a claim, or you think you have a claim and you may not. But it's really the earlier you sit down with an attorney, don't you think that'll
For sure.
help you with your case?
Yeah, absolutely. You never know. It's always worth a call to find out, right? And just like Devlin was saying, you might think, oh, maybe there was something differently that I could have done, but you might find out that actually there is a recovery there for you.
Yeah, and
Even in North Carolina.
Even in North Carolina. And I would say the sooner that you call an attorney about something after the incident, the better, because many times we can go out and preserve evidence where the longer you wait, the more likely it is that things are lost, people's memories change. And in the grand scheme of things, many times, even though people think, oh, maybe there's something I could have done differently, if you're close in time to when the incident happens, you call in.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we can find witnesses or other instances where other people have had the same kind of thing happen. Maybe the concrete panels where you tripped and fell are very, very close in color.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time you call a lawyer a year later, it could have changed.
Yeah.
Well, next week is the unofficial start of summer. I know a lot of people are going to be out and enjoying a lot of things that are outdoors, including their pools. Now, anybody who has a pool, do they have to take any kind of special precautions to make sure that nobody gets injured on their personal property?
Oh yeah, I can definitely think of a case that I handled in the past. You definitely want to have the right locks to keep kids out that shouldn't be there, because kids wander. And sometimes they may end up in a situation where they don't know and don't appreciate the danger that they're in.
And that's, as we talked about on other shows, that's an attractive nuisance. It's a very hard case to defend when it comes to children, because all of us are always in a position where we should be trying to protect the best interest of the child. So, Devlin's right. That's an important thing if you're going to have, especially a commercial pool.
Another thing we might be happening in a couple of weeks are some Memorial Day cookouts. If somebody comes over to your house and you're doling out the steaks and the hot dogs and the burgers and the beer, and then somebody gets in a car accident after they've been at your house having down in a few beers, are you responsible for over serving the individual?
Well, Brittney, why don't we start with South Carolina, and
Yeah.
Devlin can.
Yeah, so there's going to be different standards that are going to get looked at. The first thing that comes to my mind is if that person, whether or not they're a minor. Social host liability is an issue, and in particular, if that person is a minor. So obviously, minors should not be drinking. We should not be giving alcoholic beverages to minors.
And let me just interject. If you're having a party and it's a graduation party and there's kids there and they're drinking, you're defensive. I didn't know they were drinking. It's not going to cut it. You have a responsibility. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And so and then going back to if that person is an adult, obviously that person has something to drink and then leaves, decides to drive and gets in an accident that causes an injury. There can be liability on the part of the social host.
Yeah, and I would say that's very similar in North Carolina too. Just as a governing principle, you got to take care of your own at home and make sure that you're not creating dangerous situations for people, and making sure that minors don't have access to alcohol and that people don't drink too much and then get behind the wheel after you supplied it. That's something that we all need to take care of.
Yeah, if somebody's an adult and they're drinking at your house,
Right.
they're ultimately going to be responsible, but you still have that moral compass, hopefully, that you make sure they get an Uber and get
Hopefully.
home safe,
Yeah.
and we should all do that.
Our phone lines are open. 848-8080 is the phone number as always. And tell you what, before we run to a break, let's go ahead and run to the phones. We got Tina on the line with us right now in Myrtle Beach. Hi, Tina. Thanks for hanging on. What's your question for the panel today?
My question is, for a commercial business in a slip and fall situation, if your damages exceed the amount of the policy, and then there falls into what happens then?
That's a great question. I don't know, Devlin, you want to start, and then
Sure. I think, well, it would depend in part, on what state you're in and
Yeah.
what different, what different pressure points there are there, and what people have to look at that are involved in that. And of course, you're talking about a situation where there's insurance involved, and so your insurance company is going to have certain duties to you, in handling the claim, for example. But ultimately, if there's a verdict that exceeds the policy limits, an individual can be responsible for it.
Yeah, and so say, and I think this might be where you were going, if they offer you the limits, but the limits don't completely cover your damages, you could proceed to trial, as Devlin mentioned, get a verdict above and beyond. If the insurance company acted in good faith, you might be limited to getting that amount of recovery from the insurance company, but you still have a judgment against the defendant. If it's a commercial, a corporation, then you will have potentially the ability to try to collect assets and follow up in that respect. And you'd hope if you have a commercial entity that you have enough insurance to cover for people getting injured for all their harms and losses. So,
And this is a good scenario too, where you do want to make sure to sit down with an attorney, because there may very well be more than one entity that's responsible, and that's something that an attorney is going to look into and research and find out what different entities might be responsible for that property, for that premises, and for your injuries. So there might be multiple policies.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So Tina, hopefully that answers your question, but as Brittney said, if it didn't, make sure and give somebody a call, give an attorney a call, because personal injury attorneys are usually free consultations no matter where you call, so make sure and get the advice you need. We're going to run to a break here real quick. As soon as we get back, we'd love to talk to you. If you have any questions about personal injury, our phone number's on your screen, 843-848-8080. Give us a call here on Legal Access. Welcome back to Legal Access, brought to you by the Maguire Law Firm. Here on your panel today, as we're talking about personal injury, we do have Ian Maguire, also Devlin Horton, and Brittney Jones. So give us a call, 843-848-8080. If you have any questions about personal injury, that entails a lot of different things: car accidents, slip and fall accidents, if you've been hurt on somebody else's property. And a lot of people will call personal injury firms if their loved one or they have been hurt by a doctor. I mean, something that we would consider to be medical malpractice. Why is a med mal case so much different than just a run-of-the-mill personal injury case?
well, the standard of care for doctors, rightfully so, protects them to a great degree. So they're certainly not as cut and dry. In South Carolina, and you can talk about North Carolina, we have to have an expert that will say there was a breach of the standard of care. As far as you have to have pretty substantial damages, because those cases are very expensive to get ready for trial. So I know North Carolina, I don't know if there's differences in the way procedurally it works, but
North Carolina is the same, very similar, it sounds like, in the way it's done in South Carolina. You have to have a consulting doctor that's reviewed the case and said, yes, there's a breach of the standard of care, which certainly makes those cases more expensive to pursue. And so you do have to have larger damages in the way of economic damages to pursue many times. That doesn't necessarily mean that a claim isn't meritorious, just that there are some practical constraints to bringing those claims, but by no means should that discourage anybody from calling a personal injury attorney and talking about those damages that they might have and what happened to them, so that they can make sure that, if there is a bad doctor out there, that they're held accountable. And
like Devlin said, at the very least, you get some answers. We have people that come in our office, we'll send it off to an expert, we'll send it off sometimes to attorneys. That's all they do is medical malpractice. And they might say, okay, we don't think it's a case, but at least they're not going to sit there years later and say, I wonder if I had a case. They know they did everything they could for their family member or for themselves. So it's, we all will agree and can't emphasize enough, sit down with somebody if you have any questions with an attorney that practices in that area, and don't sit and wonder if you should have. Just go and do that. It's almost always free consultations, right?
Yeah, almost always a free consultation, and most personal injury lawyers and everyone that I know at least will, hear you out, talk to you. They'll at least have a good sense of, is this something that I should talk to a consulting doctor about? And we as personal injury attorneys have relationships sometimes with doctors that will talk to us, at least at the outset and say, yeah, there may be something here. I think you want to look a little closer, or no, that one's not one that, I think that you're going to be able to meet the standard on.
Yeah, but I have friends who are that's all they do is that kind of law, and they'll say they might get 100 cases come in, and a lot of them you think would be cases, and they'll only take 1 or 2 or 3 out of that whole batch because of a variety of reasons that we mentioned. But having said that, I still would encourage anyone that has questions to sit down and get some answers, right, Brittney?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you guys hit on everything. Definitely worth it to sit down and have somebody to take a look at it.
One of the facets of personal injury, like I said, slip and fall accidents, or being hurt on somebody else's property, or premises liability, they depend upon negligence being proven. I know it's a broad question, but what is kind of like the definition of gross negligence or negligence in a case of an accident?
Well, reckless conduct that is going to be substantially likely to lead to an injury is gross negligence.
Yeah.
You would be able to have to prove ordinary negligence first in order to meet that higher burden for gross negligence.
Yep. And gross negligence comes into effect a lot. There's a number of times. Sometimes with punitive damages cases, you have to demonstrate that, among other things. But it comes up also in waiver cases, which we have in Myrtle Beach, because we have a lot of people getting on amusement rides and that kind of thing. So you might be prevented from recovery if you signed a waiver, but if there's gross negligence, you might, so to speak, still be in the game and able to present a claim and recover. So that's important distinction.
And I'd say no matter what state that you're in, you should definitely have a lawyer if you got seriously hurt. Look at the waiver too.
Yeah.
Don't let that be a barrier to you. Businesses will use those as a psychological tool to dissuade people from making claims. People think, oh, I signed a waiver, there's nothing I can do about this. Well, that's not always the case.
Not always.
Well, we had Tina from Myrtle Beach on a little bit ago, and we told her if she has any more questions to call a lawyer. So she's done that. She's called back to talk to us. Tina, hi, thanks for calling back. What's your follow-up question?
My follow-up question is there a statute of limitations for a medical, I don't know if you call it medical malpractice, or if you have a medical type claim?
Yeah. So the quick answer is yes. And I would sit down with the attorney as soon as possible to figure out what that timeline is, especially with medical malpractice. If it's a car wreck, it's generally a very definitive time, where you have to file your claim. Usually 3 years, sometimes 2 years. But with a medical malpractice case, it might be when the injury or the malpractice was discovered, right? So there's what they call the discovery rule. So I'll let Devlin and Brittney chime in on this, but generally speaking, sit down with an attorney as soon as you can, because every case is going to be a little different when it comes to medical malpractice.
Yeah, absolutely. Those cases are so fact specific that you really need to talk to somebody that can help tease out all the little details, because the devil's in the details, and that's what really matters in those cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And the date of discovery, that's going to be something that's super fact specific. So want to take a close look.
But great questions. Thank you, Tina. And then I wish you the best luck. Hopefully they're not for you, these, but if they are, I hope you find some help.
Tina, hopefully you got all the answers you need, and if you'd like to get answers just like Tina, the phone number's on your screen. We've got to run to a break right now, but we'll be back and take your phone calls as we talk about personal injury here on Legal Access. Welcome back. It's Legal Access, brought to you by the Maguire Law Firm, answering your questions here today about personal injury. If you've got any personal injury questions, whether it's a car accident, slip and fall accident, if you've been hurt on somebody else's property, give us a call here. Got about 5 minutes left in the show, so we probably should be able to fit you in right under the wire. Here to answer those questions for you, Ian Maguire, also Devlin Horton, and Brittney Jones. So thanks for being here. and we'll get you on the air. All you need to do is give us a call. Now, if you've been hurt on somebody else's property, a slip and fall accident or something like that, and you try to report it to the business manager or the owner of the property, and they're being less than happy about it. I mean, if they're being hateful about what's going on, how should you handle a situation like that?
I would start by saying there's never a situation where you should not act with, I don't care how they're acting towards you. You want to keep your composure and always be as, and I know you're probably hurt. You're not, it's a stressful situation, but stay calm and don't, because later on, first of all, it's the right thing to do. Secondly, you end up in litigation. You don't want somebody saying, he called me this or he screamed this. It's not going to help your case.
Yeah.
So, but if they're not helping, you've done your job.
Yeah.
You've told them, I would leave, and if I was significantly hurt, I would get with an attorney. And Devlin mentioned, that there's steps taken where we write a letter to preserve evidence, and that's the important thing, right, in that case.
Yeah, and something else that can be done sometimes is, take pictures.
Yeah.
We all have phones in our pockets, and if it's possible to do, take some pictures to document it, because it's eventually going to end up with an insurance adjuster who's going to look and see, all right, what can I do to verify whether or not this happened? Because sometimes their clients don't always tell them the truth. So if you can document it, that's good. I would also say tell the people in the emergency department very specific details about what happened and particularly where it happened.
And if you're injured, if you need to call, EMS to come get you, if you're severely injured, go ahead and call, have them come there, pick you up, so that it's documented where you were, where you fell, or just like Devlin said, make sure that you specifically, here's where I was, here's how I fell, here's what caused me to fall, so that all of that makes it into the record, and absolutely photos of what caused you to fall.
Yeah, because in the old days, it would be, oh, is he being litigious, taking pictures? Now it's expected. Everybody has a phone. Most of the time, the premises are going to have cameras as well, and that's actually been very helpful to weeding out the truth in cases. So it's been a great thing, but that's absolutely true. Take pictures or video even of the area where the injury occurred.
Now, earlier this week, I had occasion to be at the emergency room. Everybody's okay, so I appreciate the concern. But one of the questions they asked was this because of an accident? You had a car accident or an accident at work? Why is an emergency room worried about how the accident occurred like that?
You want to start?
Probably because they want to know who to bill.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, and obviously you should always tell the truth and let them know how you fell and why you're there and what was the cause of it. And in particular, if it's the lady, whoever billing you, give them your health insurance information always, and let your doctor in particular know exactly how you fell, if it was from a car accident or however. Some of those details I think is a bit much, maybe sometimes for the person in the billing department.
Yeah, if in a hospital, if they have insurance and it's billed through insurance, they might get 20 or 30 cents on the dollar. If they're like, oh, it's a wreck, they might try not to bill it through insurance and think there's all these different things that are going on. But
Pet peeves.
the bottom line for you is just tell the truth and let your lawyer handle those details later, but just always be honest about everything.
We've only got about a minute left, but we talked about statute of limitations for a minute earlier. What if you get hurt on tripping over a municipal sidewalk or a curb or something like that that belongs to a city?
Well, the rules are different generally, and the time will be different. So you want to get to an attorney in those cases. I know we're it's self-serving, being a dead horse, whatever you want to say, but that's what you want to do, right?
Yeah, you want to get to an attorney so that they can send out the preservation notices and preserve evidence.
Thank you everybody for watching here today. We've been talking about personal injury. Next week when we get back together, just in time for Memorial Day weekend, boating law, that's going to be our topic. It's the annual event here that we have on Legal Access. We talk about boating right before Memorial Day because we know it's a popular topic. So that's coming up next week. I want to thank Ian Maguire, Devlin Horton, and also Brittney Jones for being here today. I'm Dave Priest. We'll see you again next week right here on Legal Access, brought to you by the Maguire Law Firm.
You may wish to consult a lawyer to obtain case-specific legal advice. Information regarding lawyers can be located online or by contacting the South Carolina Bar Lawyer Referral Service, toll-free at 1-800-868-2284. If you are currently represented by an attorney, you should direct all legal questions to your attorney. The nature of any legal issue may depend on a multitude of